Some movies were banned after just one screening. Others caused riots, lawsuits, and people fainting in theaters. And a few were so disturbing that governments tried to erase them from history. Let's start.
Like a story or good cinematography. All that's left is pure, unflinching brutality meant to mimic reality. The camera lingers on the victims, making you feel like you're watching a real crime unfold. This effect was so convincing that August Underground has often been mistaken for a real. Over time, it became kind of a legend in underground horror circles. It wasn't something you picked up at Blockbuster. You heard about it from a friend, got a bootleg VHS or sketchy DVD, and maybe even felt a little guilty owning it. That sense of, should I even be watching this, gave it an edge that made it unforgettable for horror fans. The controversy helped too. In 2004, Australian customs officials seized copies of its sequel, August Underground's Mortem, calling it offensive to standards of morality and decency. However, bans and seizures only fueled its cult status. A year later, Vogel himself was detained at Canadian Customs while bringing the trilogy to a horror festival. Authorities confiscated the films under obscenity laws, sparking international headlines. He wasn't charged in the end, but the media ran with it. Men Behind the Sun, 1988. Men Behind the Sun is a film that depicts the raw and brutal real-life horrors of World War II, where prisoners were used as human guinea pigs for so-called scientific research. One of the most haunting moments in the film happens when a group of young Japanese boys who are part of the Youth Corps become friends with a young mute Chinese boy. They play games with him and treat him like a little brother. But then their commanders order them to bring the boy into the facility. Believing he'll be safe, the boys obey, only to watch in horror as he is experimented on in a most horrifying way. The documentary-style film doesn't hold back on gruesome imagery. We see conscious prisoners being vivisected, chemical weapons being tested on people, and frostbite experiments where frozen flesh shatters like glass. There's also the infamous scene where a live cat is thrown into a room filled with starving rats. The backlash was immediate. Australia banned the film outright. In Europe, many releases were heavily censored, and in Japan, director T.F. Mao even received death threats. The controversy went deeper than the graphic special effects. It was because the film forced Japan to face one of its darkest wartime secrets. For some, it was nothing more than exploitation, turning real war crimes into a grotesque spectacle. But for others, it was a necessary and brutal reminder of the inhumane actions of the Japanese Army's Unit 731, forcing audiences to look at history instead of turning away. Holocaust, 1980. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, Holocaust follows a documentary crew that vanishes in the Amazon rainforest while trying to film so-called savage tribes. The rescue team later finds their footage, and what they see is horrifying. Staged, brutal violence, and them all made to look like they were real. Because it was shot in a grainy documentary style, the film felt so real that many people genuinely believed it was a true crime film. People thought the actors actually died on camera. The controversy exploded immediately. In Italy, Deodato was arrested for and to prove that the actors were alive, he had to bring them into court, breaking the contracts he had with them to stay out of the public eye for a year. Only then were the charges dropped. However, the animal scenes were indeed real, and they were all harmed on camera, which sparked outrage that still exists today. Deodato was later found guilty of obscenity and animal cruelty, though he avoided jail time. Saw 3D, 2010. Released in 2010, Saw 3D was instantly banned in Germany, restricted in France, and even had its trailer pulled off UK television after a child complained it was too frightening. Saw 3D is the 7th installment of the Saw franchise. The movie follows Bobby Dagan, an author who has become a local celebrity by lying about being a survivor of the Jigsaw Killer's games. But his fame comes with a deadly price. He finds himself trapped in a real game where he must save his wife. Meanwhile, a different game is being played. Jigsaw's ex-wife, Jill Tuck, tells the police that a rogue detective, Mark Hoffman, is behind all the recent murders.
There's a new game going on.
The police begin a manhunt to find him, hoping to put an end to the games once and for all. Saw 3D went all in on the gore, showcasing some of the most sadistic and over-the-top traps in the franchise's history. One of the most shocking scenes traps 3 men in a publicly visible glass box as buzzsaws descend, forcing a horrified crowd to watch a live, bloody execution. Another infamous moment takes place in a garage where a man is glued to a car seat. To save his friends from being crushed, decapitated, and flattened, he has to rip his own skin off, a gruesome task he fails to accomplish. The film shows every brutal death in graphic 3D detail, leaving nothing to the imagination. The film hit theaters in the United States and Canada on October 29, 2010, and while it was a box office hit, raking in $136.2 million worldwide, it was not well received by critics. For fans, Saw 3D was the ultimate spectacle of gore, but for censors around the world, it was simply too much. France took an extreme measure, completely revoking the film's distribution license until it could be re-evaluated. In the UK, while the movie itself was allowed to be shown uncut, its trailer was banned from airing before 9 p.m. after a 10-year-old found it too distressing. Irreversible, 2002. Irreversible is a famous French thriller film released in 2002 that tells its story in reverse. Opening with brutal vengeance and winding back to a 9-minute unbroken scene of violence that made many audience members walk out in shock. The film opens in chaos. Pierre and Marcus are inside a Paris nightclub looking for a man for revenge. Marcus then takes a life in one of cinema's most infamous scenes, smashing his face with a fire extinguisher in a single unbroken shot. From there, the story moves backwards, revealing the source of their vengeance. Marcus's girlfriend, Alex, played by Monica Bellucci, was taken advantage of in a pedestrian underpass, filmed in a 9-minute static take with no music and no cutaways. Then the film gradually works backwards toward innocence and love. By the time we reach the final scene, a quiet, sunlit glimpse of Alex, happy and carefree, we're burdened with the weight of everything the story has already revealed. Noy's directing style is as confrontational as his narrative. Long takes, swirling handheld movements, and disorienting camera spins create a suffocating atmosphere that mirrors the emotional turmoil of his characters. The infamous tunnel scene, filmed in a single uninterrupted shot, became one of the most discussed moments in 21st century cinema. This wasn't only for its content, but for what it revealed about the line between artistic provocation and exploitation. The cultural fallout was immediate. The UK gave it an 18 and over rating without any cuts, arguing that even though it was deeply gruesome, it handled the subject matter seriously. Other countries were much stricter, with some banning the film entirely. Many worried it would re-traumatize viewers, while others argued that editing it would take away its entire point. When it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2002, the reaction was total chaos. Some people walked out in horror, while others gave Noy a standing ovation for his bravery. Some critics called it brilliant exploration of time and violence, while others labeled it as torment and said it went too far just to be shocking. Grotesque, 2008. Released in 2008, the Japanese horror film Grotesque, directed by Koji Shiraishi, quickly earned a reputation not just for being brutal, but for what it seemed to say about where horror cinema was headed. The UK banned it entirely, which hardly ever happened anymore. That decision sparked a whole wave of debate around censorship, artistic limits, and what horror is even supposed to be for. Unlike more mainstream gruesome horror films, which at least try to wrap their gore in some kind of storyline or twisted morality, Grotesque doesn't really bother. There's no backstory, no clear character development, no real plot arc. It's just raw, relentless violence put out there with almost clinical precision. Watching it feels less like a movie and more like an endurance test. That stripped-down approach was a big shift. Some people saw it as a bold experiment, others were understandably not impressed. To them, it looked like horror had hit a dead end, no artistry, just shock for shock's sake. Ironically, the UK ban probably gave Grotesque way more attention than it might have gotten otherwise. Suddenly it was being talked about alongside those notorious video nasties from the 80s that had been targeted by censors. The movie became a kind of legend, not because people had seen it, but because they weren't allowed to. Looking back, Grotesque isn't really about plot, it's more about what it exposed, like how much can an audience take? When does horror stop being art and start being exploitation? Whether you think it was just empty provocation or a serious statement about the genre's limits, it definitely left a mark. The Last House on the Left, 1972. Another Wes Craven film earns a spot in Level 5 with his debut film, The Last House on the Left. Released in 1972, this movie was such a cultural gut punch that irate viewers at one screening attempted to break into the projection booth to destroy the film. The story follows Marie and her friend Phyllis, two teenage girls who go out for a night of fun. But their evening takes a horrific turn when a gang of escaped convicts kidnaps them. In a brutal series of events, one girl loses her life and the other is viciously harmed. Seeking refuge, the convicts unknowingly end up at the home of one of their victims, Marie's parents. As the grieving parents uncover the horrifying truth about their daughter's disappearance, they unleash a morally ambiguous and violent revenge of their own. The movie is truly difficult to watch. Parts of what make it so harsh is its amateurish look, the grainy and shaky camera which makes everything feel uncomfortably real. It's a movie filled with brutal violence and gore that audiences just weren't prepared for. When Wes Craven made the movie, he thought it would be a small movie that no one would see, but he was wrong. Clever ads like radio commercials that told people to chant, "It's only a movie," made it a big hit. Even famous movie critic Roger Ebert liked it, saying it was brutal and tragic, but also important because it showed real horror instead of hiding it. The Hills Have Eyes, 1977. The family trailer is ripped apart. Terrifying screams. Flames rise as mutants tear into the Carter family, harming and feasting on their victims. This was Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes, a film so brutal it was nearly slapped with an X rating. The film follows the Carter family, a suburban family that takes a wrong turn in the Nevada desert and breaks down near an old nuclear test site. But they're not alone. Watching them from the hills is Jupiter and his clan. Mutants, cannibals, people twisted by fallout and abandonment. When the Carters realize they're being hunted, it's already too late. One by one, the family is attacked, their trailer is set on fire, and survival becomes the only thing that matters. Craven tapped into real fears from the 1970s, nuclear testing, government neglect, and what happens when the so-called civilized world collides with the forgotten and deformed people it leaves behind. The mutants aren't mindless monsters. They're the mirror image of the Carters, families willing to kill to protect their own. But the violence pushed society's limits. The MPAA demanded cuts, forcing Craven to tone down scenes like Fred's brutal death, the savage attack on the trailer, and Jupiter's blood-soaked end. In the UK, it was thrown onto the Video Nasties list, censored for years before finally being released uncut in 2003. Even with the controversy, the movie exploded. Made for less than $700,000, it grossed around $25 million worldwide. Critics praised it for its tension, its bleak humor, and its willingness to push horror into places that felt uncomfortably real. The Green Inferno, 2013. Eli Roth's horror film, The Green Inferno, sparked a ton of controversy. The gruesome and graphic content was one thing, but it mostly came from its portrayal of indigenous peoples as bloodthirsty savages. Shot deep in the Peruvian and Chilean jungle, the story follows Justine and a group of idealistic college students from New York. They join an activist collective to protest illegal deforestation in the Amazon. They chain themselves to bulldozers, live stream the stunt, and briefly taste victory when the loggers are forced to stand down. But as they fly home, their plane crashes in the middle of the jungle. The survivors celebrate being alive until they're captured by a local tribe. That's when the real nightmare begins. The tribe greets them not as guests, but as prey. The students are caged and subjected to gruesome rituals, and what happens next is pure splatter horror. Ritual killings, dismemberments, and scenes of cannibalism so graphic they earned the film outright bans in Malaysia and cuts in other countries. With real indigenous villagers as extras, the film was widely criticized for promoting racist stereotypes, sparking an outcry from human rights organizations. Critics also slammed Roth for suggesting the tribe practiced female genital mutilation, something not associated with Amazon cultures. Roth defended the film as satire, claiming it mocked the hypocrisy of social media-driven slacktivism, where privileged outsiders try to save communities they don't understand. Blood Feast, 1963. The film opens with a caution. This film is not for the faint of heart, and it immediately delivers. Blood Feast doesn't tease the horror, it forces you to watch every gruesome detail, from a woman's leg being hacked apart to her tongue being ripped out. Every cut and gush of bright red blood is shown in vivid, shocking detail. Directed by Herschel Gordon Lewis, it's widely regarded as the very first splatter film. The story follows Fuad Ramses, a deranged caterer who harmed women for their body parts. He is preparing a blood feast to resurrect the ancient goddess Ishtar. In an ancient horrific ritual, women were once sacrificed on an altar and their body parts were then cooked and served. This gruesome feast was said to bring about Ishtar's rebirth. Now Ramses is doing the same, serving human flesh to his unsuspecting guests. Hoping to make the gore as realistic as possible, director Herschel Gordon Lewis used real animal organs as props. On set, animal tongue and various entrails made the scenes even more unsettling. Lewis's concept for the film started after Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho hit theaters. He felt the film had cheated by showing the results of the murder in the film, but not the action. So he went against every rule the censors had, putting every gruesome detail on screen for the world to see. The end result was a film that was crude and totally unforgettable, forever changing the face of horror. And he got his wish. Censors hated it. The UK banned the film outright, and decades later, it became the oldest movie on the infamous Video Nasties list during the 1980s moral panic. The Evil Dead, 1981. Sam Raimi's low-budget horror masterpiece, The Evil Dead, was unleashed in 1981. Shot with a small, dedicated crew in a remote Tennessee cabin, the film became a relentless nightmare that shocked audiences worldwide. It was so intense that it became one of the infamous Video Nasties in Britain, a film initially banned and heavily censored for its gruesome content. The story follows Ashley Ash Williams, who heads to a remote cabin for a fun getaway with his girlfriend and 3 friends. Their trip takes a horrifying turn when they discover the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead. The group accidentally unleashes a flood of evil, turning their weekend escape into a fight for survival. From there, the film becomes a terrifying experience, with never-ending possessions, screams, and gruesome practical effects. A pencil jammed into an ankle, eyes gouged out, heads hacked apart with axes. The film never lets up. Ash is forced to watch as his friends become possessed one by one, leaving him with a difficult choice: kill them or be killed himself. VHS made it more infamous than the box office did. In the UK, The Evil Dead dominated home video sales, but it also became the target of moral campaigner Mary Whitehouse, who branded it the #1 nasty. Politicians even screened its bloodiest scenes in Parliament, warning it could corrupt society. And in one bizarre claim, even dogs. The backlash turned into full censorship. The BBFC initially cut nearly a minute from the theatrical release, but on VHS the film spread uncut, sparking seizures, prosecutions, and its addition to the official Video Nasties blacklist. Under the 1984 Video Recordings Act, another 66 seconds were censored for its 1990 home video release. Fans had to wait almost 2 decades before the film was finally cleared, restored, and re-released uncut in 2000 to 2001. Dead Alive, 1992. Peter Jackson directed what's still considered one of the goriest films ever made, Dead Alive, released internationally as Brain Dead. It was so over the top with blood and torsos scattered that entire countries banned it outright. Set in 1950s Wellington, the film follows Lionel Cosgrove, a timid young man trapped under the thumb of his controlling mother, Vera. But when she's bitten by a Sumatran rat monkey at the zoo, things take a horrific turn. Vera transforms into a ravenous, flesh-eating zombie, and Lionel's desperate attempt to keep her hidden sparks a chain reaction of carnage. From there, the film snowballs into pure chaos. Zombies multiply, bodies explode, guts crawl across the floor like they're alive, and in the unforgettable climax, Lionel straps a lawnmower to his chest and plows through an entire horde of the undead, drenching the set in rivers of blood and severed limbs. But the extremity came at a cost. Dead Alive was banned, censored, or chopped apart in multiple countries. Germany didn't just ban it, they made owning the uncut version illegal, with copies confiscated under laws against extreme depictions of violence. Singapore, South Korea, and Finland banned it too, though Finland eventually lifted the ban in 2001. In the US, 2 very different versions circulated. A heavily cut R-rated version at 85 minutes, and an unrated version closer to Jackson's intent, which fans continue to seek out. Raw, 2016. When Julia Ducournau's Raw premiered, the fallout wasn't just applause and awards. People literally fainted. At the Toronto International Film Festival, multiple audience members collapsed during screenings, and some were even rushed to the hospital. That's how intense this film was. On the surface, Raw is a coming-of-age story, but beyond that, it's one of the most banned body horror films of the last decade. The film follows Justine, a young veterinary student and lifelong vegetarian. But during a brutal hazing ritual, she's forced to eat raw rabbit kidney. That single bite awakens her uncontrollable craving for flesh. First animal, then human. Her transformation isn't merely about hunger. It collides with her sexuality, her identity, and her relationships with her sister. In one of the film's most infamous moments, Justine's sister Alexia is giving her a bikini wax when a horrific accident occurs. Alexia tries to remove the stubborn wax with scissors and accidentally slices off her own finger. As Alexia faints from the pain, Justine stares at the bloody stump, picks up the severed finger, and eats it. Later, when Alexia catches her, Justine lies to their parents and blames the family dog. Ducournau calls her approach flesh fascination, shaped by her childhood as the daughter of 2 doctors. Her camera treats the body not with disgust, but with clinical intimacy, forcing audiences to stare at every vein, every cut, every raw piece of meat. Raw premiered at Cannes in 2016, winning the Fipresci Prize, and later took home the Sutherland Award for Originality. Critics hailed it as part of the new French extremity, a wave of films unflinching in their depictions of the body and violence.